to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here, and welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today, we face the inconvenient truth that our marketing data can't be trusted. But we're going to learn what we can do about it. Let's get straight into today's episode. Data warehouses are amazing things. You can toss all kinds of information to them and then pull mind-blowing insights out the other end. Now, this feat happens because you're connected to outside systems holding databases, and they have their own database tables inside of them. A copy of whatever is happening in those database tables can be taken out and shot through a data pipeline and then pushed into your own data warehouse. And this system works. But today's data stacks with multiple clouds and hybrid environments and a lot of data pipelines means that the programs in charge of monitoring and logging these flows are almost buckling under the strain. It becomes overwhelming to check and ensure the quality and integrity of the data. And the more sophisticated the systems, the more errors creep into the data. If we rely on flawed data, then the outcomes and insights we generate will be equally flawed. The good news is that this is where a management approach called data observability comes in. In this episode, we're going to see how an observability platform works real-time to detect anomalies in data warehouses. Now, there's a twist here because we're in a cloud computing environment that charges by number of computing cycles. So you don't want an observability tool that is yet another pipe accessing that client data, running up the meter. The good news is that there's an easier way to do this detection when data's gone awry. You do it by comparing log files, basically metadata about the data. And this is just as effective in alerting you to problems. If you would like to hear what this is doing in a non-technical way, think of Hans Christian Andersen's Princess and the Pea story. If you don't know it, there's this girl who comes to a castle seeking shelter from the rain, claiming to be a princess. Now, the queen of the castle doubts whether she is truly of noble blood. She offers her a bed, but this bed has 20 mattresses and 20 down-filled comforters on top of it. A pea is placed underneath the bottom mattress to test if this girl detects anything. And the next morning, the princess says that she endured a sleepless night and that there must have been something hard in the bed. Well, they realize then and there that she must be a princess, since no one but a real princess could be so delicate. So there's my ham-fisted way of analogizing how an observability platform can detect a problem without actually looking underneath all those mattresses for it. I spoke with the co-founder and CEO of Masthead Data, a company which recently received $1.3 million in a pre-seed round. Now, a quick disclosure, I don't have any relationship with Masthead Data. I just think they're an interesting product. The CEO is originally from Ukraine. She came to found Masthead after working in companies where she became convinced of the need for an observability solution. She had roles as a product manager at Owox BI and Boosta, where their data solutions were encountering problems. Prior to that, she did some marketing for RAGT. She has a bachelor's and a master's degree from Summa State University, specializing in MIS and statistics. And she's also an organizer at Measure Camp, which is a volunteer community where analytics professionals come together to learn. Let's go talk to Yuliia Tkachova. I'm so glad to welcome Yuliia Tkachova. How are you doing, Yuliia?
Hi, Glenn. Pleasure to be here. I'm doing just fine. Thank you for asking. What about you?
I'm doing well. I am ready to get into talking about something that is going to possibly surprise a lot of people. And what I'm talking about is that we're working in a world where a lot of data is being put into cloud databases and Google Cloud, but there's also AWS and Azure, and we have data that's piped into these systems. But the thing that might surprise people is that sometimes the information that is sitting in those systems can have errors in it. And we need to do something about that, because if we don't have good data, garbage in, garbage out. Can you tell me, in a nutshell, why do we, after we have these wonderful systems, why do errors creep in?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So if we're going to take a step back, look back like 7 or 10 years ago, we used to have kind of couple of pipelines from Facebook ads, Google ads, to Google BigQuery, and those companies who have that streamlined to data warehouse directly, we're considering to be data driven, right? A couple of pipelines, and they're already kind of on top of the world. But as of today, if you think of data stack, sometimes it's not even just Google Cloud, it's multiple clouds, even hybrid, and number of data pipelines, number of logic applied in the data warehouse to generate insights. And on top of that, number of tables are growing exponentially. And unfortunately, it's very hard to sit on top of it and understand what is going on with data and information in it. And companies want to become data driven. They want to make decisions based on data. And it's just impossible to understand when pipelines break. Like if you have 2 or 3 pipelines, you can check them daily and you can have pretty good understanding when the data should be updated, what number of rows should be inserted into the tables. But if we are talking about dozens or hundreds of pipelines, it's just too overwhelming for data engineers and data people, data analysts, whoever is taking care of those pipelines. So data observability, in a way, guarantees data trust and make sure that business users, data users, use accurate and reliable data in their decision making by observing the data from the moment it's been ingested in data warehouse to the moment it meets business users in dashboards.
Okay, so a couple things there that I just want to do really lightning checks on, so that I can stay up to speed here. So the one that you mentioned was data observability. So am I right that data observability is just like to boil that term down, it must mean looking at how data is being moved to see if a system is doing it right. Is that fair?
It is, but it's more than that. Like, let's break down what pillars are sitting behind data observability. So at Masthead, we believe that understanding the freshness, how recent is the data in tables, at scale in every table within the data warehouse. This is one pillar. Volume, how many rows were inserted in every table. We monitor for that and understand that at scale for every single time series table within the data warehouse. On top of that, we monitor for schema changes. And that is pretty unusual, but if we're talking about e-commerces, you know that every single microservice is built by some dedicated dev team. So let's say if we're talking about checkout, there is a dev team that evolving this microservice daily. So they can push changes to this microservice, which will change the data output data engineers collect. So they can change the type of timestamp because it's easier for them to do something, and they will never
Right.
acknowledge data engineers. So we monitor for any schema changes upstream. And also we monitor every single pipeline for any malfunctions, like syntaxis error, invalid JSON, or whatever that can break the pipeline. And the fifth pillar that we have is data lineage, which helps to understand what are the implications of faulty data on downstream users down to the dashboards used by business users, if that makes
Sure.
sense.
Yeah, and I like that upstream to downstream, and observability seems to be watching things moving down that stream, and it looks to see if anything obstructed it or if anything changed, because those downstream systems are expecting things a certain way, and when they don't get it, either in the way they want or at the time they want, then, as you say, it's going to impact users. One question I have about, you mentioned BigQuery, so that's Google Cloud's own data warehouse system, and it has other ancillary pieces that handle importing data into it. Are we speaking here of things that it should know about whether it is broken? Are there not tools within the system itself that it can diagnose whether or not it's functioning?
It depends. Like, maybe you can pull some example. What do you mean? Like,
Sure. So if I guess I'm wondering if there's more than one type of error here. If it's an automated error, for example, a scheduled job that is supposed to get my, um, let's say, my HubSpot information from the last day
okay,
into my BigQuery database, and it doesn't arrive.
okay,
Are
that could
there are
happen.
there right? Are there notifications I can set up that BigQuery and Google Cloud will let me know, hey, I didn't get it?
So yeah, this is a really good question. It depends how do you streamline the data from HubSpot to Google BigQuery. So that could be Fivetran, that could be dbt, that could be custom pipeline, whatever you use. Certainly, those systems have some alerting in place, and they can do the retry, which is automated within Google Cloud, obviously. But it's still the number of pipelines, the number of tools used today within data engineering team, like it's growing
Okay.
exponentially, and you
I,
need to have this kind of unified level
yes.
that streamline all the anomalies from different pieces, not just ETLs, but also from data warehouse and Looker dashboard thing. Like you need to understand in a single place what's going on with your data infrastructure and your data to have this 10,000-foot view on what is happening to your system and data eventually.
Yes, I realize that even if, let's say, a single system tells me what's wrong with it, when I get to multiple systems, I'm probably going to get overwhelmed if each one of them is telling me each morning that something went wrong in the night. Um, there's another kind of error I know that your system addresses, and it's one that's a lot trickier to spot. Can you tell me a little bit about how human mistakes can end up causing errors in the data that we're bringing into these systems? Um, like, even though best intentioned data engineers or people who manage tags on a website can do something that will stop or skew data. Can you tell me about that?
So yeah, if you push some changes on your website and that could affect number of events you collect, there is something, yeah, we can totally spot on. And it could be as easy as volume of events you receive in the table, where you kind of, if you expect, let's say, 10,000 events per day, and one tag was screwed, and you start to receive half of those events, or the duplication happens and you start to receive 20,000 of events. That is also a spike we can totally address. But this is also a trade-off we have, because what I really want you to understand, that data observability doesn't equal data quality.
Okay, tell me
And
more.
yes, so we need to address that, because the pillars I mentioned: observe data warehouse and pipelines at scale, freshness, volume, schema change, pipeline, malfunctions, and lineage. So we kind of have this view on every metric happening within data engineers' stack in non-intrusive way. But when we talk about data quality, this is metrics of in-field values in tables. For example, number of distribution of nulls, maximum, minimum values, uh, uniqueness of IDs, and we do
Okay.
not deliver on that, because Masthead and our beliefs stand by the data observability should be non-intrusive. We do not touch the data. We do not query the data. While data quality piece requires to query the data. You cannot assess quality of particular values without running SQL query against client's table. And this is really tricky, because if I will think of it, and be perfect, like unicorn kitties, right? We would want to have these data quality checks for every single field in every single table, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do you think some of this is by the organization? So we'll return to some of the things you spoke about in a moment. But as far as how these things can happen, even with the best of intentions, is 5 pillars. There's many different ways that an error can creep in, and I'm hearing from you that as a company gets larger, as the number of data sources grows, as the number of people that you need to involve to get this data to a dashboard or elsewhere grows, that you can have issues that some of those people may not spot. So the example that you gave, you talked about somebody missing the fact that the number of events changed drastically. So if we're a one-person marketing team and we've got everything, showing up, we would look at the dashboard, we would probably spot that. But am I right that, let's say we're a multi-person team, and in fact we have someone whose role is specifically around being a data analyst, data engineer, yes, they may build a set of pipelines that work properly, but because they're not a subject matter expert in the business,
Of course.
they may not notice that the number of events change drastically. It may not, be caught on their radar. And that's why we need observability solutions to be looking even when they're looking at it as well.
Oh, it's directly connected to number of sources. It's directly connected to number of tables. And of course, number of people working with data as well. Data engineers cannot have domain expertise in data engineering and domain expertise in every sphere of the business as well. Like, they couldn't know what is the number of rows in invoice table expected. They couldn't know number of rows expected in marketing campaign, wherever. It's just impossible to have this domain expertise across, the organization. So they would need, this is where Masthead comes in to give them this visibility and observability on what is happening with data, where it kind of go out of the range of expected, so they can act on it before business users find out about it. Of course, they can talk with them as well, and this is what we observe with our current customers. So when they see this spike, like in any table that is used by data users, I don't know, like any department, they would just talk to these people if the data looks expected to them. Because if the marketing department launched a campaign, data engineer is not supposed to know about it, but there is certainly going to be a spike in number of visitors on their website. And
Right.
that could be a valid data input. But if the data been duplicated because somebody changed the tag on the website, that is
It
not
would look the
something.
same.
Yes, exactly. Because data is very different in a way it behaves. It could be influenced by system malfunction. Data change, data spikes could happen because of system malfunctions. It could happen because of seasonality. Christmas
Sure.
sells just Christmas mood, and people start to buy more, and that's it. There is no campaign needed to streamline that, right? So you cannot know precisely what is happening to the data because it's directly connected to human behavior, and it's hard to predict what's going to happen next to your consumers, right? Um, so in a way, we give this view on what is happening across the entire data warehouse to streamline the communication and collaboration between different departments and data engineering team as well, because one of the use cases we also have, there is a distributed data team, and they have like over a dozen of thousand of tables in their data warehouse and numbers of pipelines. And because the team is distributed, there is no precise ownership of those pipelines and tables.
Right.
And the data engineering team do not know themselves what is happening to their data warehouse, which tables are obsolete, which pipelines are obsolete as well. So it helps them to collaborate and to understand data usage within their organization as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I think that speaks to the nature of their work. Not to pan them, they work hard, but my guess would be that a lot of the times they're working within a project, and so they have to spend a good amount of their time working on, let's say, the next implementation. When they move a system to production, I would imagine they expect that that system will simply work. Maybe they will, see the odd maintenance ticket and they will try to, go in and diagnose and correct it. But their focus is elsewhere. So I think it's only fair to say we don't. You and I agree. They're not asleep at the switch. They
Oh
are
no.
simply inundated with other things. Those things don't have the shape of looking all the time to see whether or not something has been written properly to our database. And I wanted to mention one other thing that you brought up, and that is when the system is flagging things. Um, I think we're both saying that there's going to be a human, probably a business user, who is involved at some point, that conversation. And that
Yeah.
conversation is really important. Perhaps what we're asking the system that is observing our data to do is to simply narrow down the number of things to look at, and give the person the ability not to get distracted all the time by notifications, but to just zero in on things when they seem to be a problem, so that, as we said, we can talk them through, resolve that they're not a problem, or say, yeah, they are, and then go fix them.
So this is also kind of a trade-off that we faced, because some of the malfunctions could be resolved. For instance, pipeline couldn't run. There was an internal error, and that could be resolved during the next retry. Okay, but there are some things that, like data couldn't be inserted because the format is not supported. So it really depends on the business, on the tools, and the target audience of the business as well. Their goals, their data usage, because we have wide range of customers, and so their data usage is different. There is a ads bidding platform, and their core competitive advantage is data. So they do react fast when something breaks, because it means their product is failing.
Yeah.
But there are kind of other teams that kind of guide their decision by using data. So they can be kind of more relaxed when some dashboard is not updating. Let's say some, customer success team dashboard is not updating. But when it comes to CFO dashboard, they're going to react fast as well. So it largely depends on the internal use cases and the usage of data.
Great. We were mentioning in brief the way of doing this in a way that respects privacy. And I want to get into that. But before we do, we're going to take a really quick break. I'm breaking away for a moment, and I have to say that I couldn't do this show without your incredible support. I hope you benefit from being part of our Funnel Reboot community, and I want to remind you of some free ways that you can help get the most out of it. You can keep up to date via social media. Take your pick of Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn. We're on all of them. If you want to be notified of new episodes, visit funnelreboot.com. It'll give you a form for being emailed when each new show is out. Our website also has links to many of the podcast apps we're found on. And once you pull up the show on your app, I'd love you to subscribe to it. Lastly, if you know someone else who'd get value out of this content, please share the show's URL with them so they can do the same. I hope that along with listening, you'll consider joining the email list, following us on social, or subscribing and sharing. Now let's get back to the show. So Yuliia, a lot of systems work when we're trying to move data around through a cloud. There's a lot of times where a system needs to look at the data in order to use it. You mentioned ETL providers like Fivetran. So if we're using them to make a copy of data from an ad platform or a marketing automation system and draw that into our cloud database, they need to know. They're on a need-to-know basis because they actually have to go and get it. You make the contention, though, that the systems that do observability don't necessarily need to know. Can you tell me why you believe that?
Thank you for asking that, Glenn. So first of all, systems that we stand by the belief that systems that do not ingest data in your data warehouse shouldn't have edit access. And to make it even better, they shouldn't have read access to your data. And this is how Masthead operates. What we do, we observe data pipelines, and dashboards by ingesting only cloud-native logs and metadata. And this is how we build the observability. It's very similar to the way it's very similar the way Datadog, New Relic, Splunk operates. Those are observability systems for software engineers. They ingest only cloud-native logs and metadata. So querying data is such an unsustainable way to deliver data observability.
Okay.
Please bear with me. So building SQL first system that queries your tables on a scheduled basis is much more simple than building a system that ingests logs, parse the logs, and extract necessary data points to deliver data observability. Running queries requires at least read access to clients' data. Can you imagine having any third-party system coming in and query your tables at scale to understand its data health? I mean, this is so unsustainable. And talking about data privacy and security, it's actually a big red flag because those systems could be hacked. And this is what happening daily to businesses of different scale, like Uber, um, like I'm
Right.
sorry, just yeah, like every scale is happening daily because data breach happening to big companies because third party vendors were hacked.
Right. So you're saying they had a fortress um, inside their first party walls that kept the data. It was a weakness by an outside system that was querying and retrieving data, taking it outside to that probably got hacked.
Not necessarily taking it outside, but um, let's say you have a system and you embedded a third party vendor who has explicit access to your data. So
Yep.
if that third party vendor is going to be hacked, it
Right.
also means that they the data breach could happen to your
Yeah, they can
data,
spoof
which
spoof them and come in looking at your stuff as if they're them.
and this is the biggest threat because then if we will assess the risk of having data malfunctions and having data breach happening to your system, I mean, there are a number of companies that couldn't tolerate the possibility of having data breach.
So we have a different, there's many regulatory regimes out there. Are you also saying that we should be mindful, based on where our customers are in the world, that we could be in violation of someone's privacy regulations if we are using a service that goes in and actually views or edits our data?
So let's put it this way. First of all, Gartner predicts that by the end of 2024, 75% of people's personal data are going to be under the data privacy and security regulations
Hmm.
worldwide. And this is huge because it's actually a big macro environmental trend where we gaining control of our personal data, because what we stand by and our values at Masthead that um, knowing what's happening to your data, which system have access to it, and which organization benefit from it is a basic human right. So once you have any system parsing your data and knowing which is where is your email, what is your ID, and so on and so forth, like personal identification data, it's just unsustainable because once the data breach happens, that can affect you. And organizations that uses these third-party tools that do not ingest data in your data warehouse, so it's not absolutely necessary tools, right? uh, need to make these decisions to safeguard your data as well. And there are so many organizations of different scale as of today that already are mindful about that. They have rigorous
Okay.
data privacy and security policies in place to onboard third-party vendors. Yes.
Some of the people listening might push back and say, but Yulia, I'm a marketing user. I'm just looking at a dashboard that is summarizing data. I actually don't see the names, the emails of the individual people that are being written to my database. Since I'm not actually looking at them, do I still have to be under the privacy regulations for where those customers are?
Oh, of course. Like we shouldn't
We're
how
not
do you
off the hook.
say no, you still. So here's the thing, like, I wish companies invest as much in data literacy and data privacy literacy, and educating their employees as much as they invest in becoming data driven. Because there is ethic side part, ethic part
Yes.
into it as well. Because 10 years ago, when marketers were exposed to this vast opportunities in data, they did crazy things.
Yes.
And I'm not saying that it's because they're bad people. They were in a way excited about technologies, and legislation is going to be always lagging compared to technologies. So what I encourage is every professional who has access to data understand data privacy and security regulations in their region and in their field where they operate. I don't encourage them to become, like fluent or do the suggestions on that, but I would rather, I would highly suggest being mindful of data they work with, because
Yes.
every piece of data is actually a human being.
Yes. And I mean, I'm going to speak up for my colleagues in marketing here. We are hemmed in on all sides. Um, it's
Yes,
it's it's
that's true.
one would love to say that we could just not collect any personally identifiable information and still do well in our jobs. But I mean, we should try to follow best practice, which is only collect the data that you need. However, when it comes to things like audience targeting, doesn't matter which platform you're talking. Google Ads, as much as any other, will say, well, now you can upload a list, and you certainly need to have their customized um, ID for that individual, but they will encourage you to also use some identifiable traits um, to make that targeting more narrow, and
Sure.
and have a higher likelihood of targeting people efficiently. Just being able to do that puts us in a delicate place with holding on to data that um, may contravene a privacy regulation. So we have to be careful. I think it's just basically being a good steward, being a good owner of that data. We've been entrusted with it. We have to be using it for certain things. Like I said, I don't think there's an option for us to just strip away everything and only look at high summary data. But what I'm hearing you say is, let's not make the problem worse by getting an observability tool that, on top of the other tools and the other data that we're holding on to, also wants to peer in and see all of our data.
Exactly. And there is also two other benefits coming into. So first of all, onboarding an observability solution that is not intrusive. I mean by that, not touching the data, means that it's much more easier onboarding it in terms of internal data privacy and security policies. Like, we do not look at your tables. We have no idea what is happening inside your tables and your data, which also means there is no data leak possible on the architectural level. So getting onto production for us, it may take, from a couple of days to a couple of weeks, depending on the company scale. But it's much more easier than compared to system that actually requires at least read access to clients' data. And third part to that is that we do not increase clients' cloud cost, since we do not run SQL queries against clients' data.
You're not hitting quota.
Exactly. And if we're talking about data warehouses like Google BigQuery, where we operate, or Snowflake, those system bills primarily by number of, based on compute,
Yes.
because those are query agents. So running SQL queries against your tables actually increases your cloud cost. And it's always worth evaluating the total cost of ownership of those tools, not just how much they cost you a year compared to the benefits they create. Yeah. So being non-intrusive, as we are, also means being sustainable with your cloud cost.
And I suppose another benefit is that if you follow the alerts, you may be able to catch things more quickly. So we talked earlier about, let's say, the beginning of a campaign. Let's say that the data engineer was tasked with setting up tags for that new campaign. We may notice maybe in the first few hours or maybe day or two after launch that a tag hasn't been properly firing. At least with a tool like this, we're able to go back to that data engineer, get that resolved, and from there on, our data is going to be something we can rely on for making decisions, right? We don't want to be waiting too long. Um, there's credibility and trustworthiness at stake here, right? We have executive teams that are looking at the numbers that we put out and expecting them to be right.
Oh, so I see that as creating credibility for data engineers across the organization as well. Because once data engineers are being on top of the data pipelines and data that have been used by business users, and they collaborate with these business users to resolve issues faster, that actually increases trust. That they know what they're doing, that they can prevent things that could harm business users as well. So having a system like this and letting data engineers to fix problems before data consumers find out about it definitely increase trust in data across the organization.
Sure. The trust thing, while it would be nice to say that we could just all trust these systems to work, that's not reality. That errors do creep in. And I suppose the best way for us to approach it is to verify whether they're working and take it from there, right? Just keep finding the vulnerabilities, keep closing them, and making our data ever better so that we can actually get on with the other parts of marketing that we have to do, right?
Well, that's really interesting because I started my career in a system that collects user behavioral data from clients' website and versus data to Google BigQuery back then. And I was working as a product manager there. So one of the most common questions I received from end users, digital marketers, was, Yuliia, how can we trust this data? Yes, that is still the problem. Because once the data do not support people's intuition in a way, they tend to not trust it. And this is one of the biggest bias because unfortunately, human beings want approval from every data point in their beliefs, and it's not necessarily work this way. So having this layer that actually proves that, hey, listen, your intuition is great, but in this case, the data signals about something different can be really beneficial to, to touch base with reality faster.
That human element is a really, it's a wild card. I've seen other sides, Yuliia. You might not believe it, but where a write error was found in the way that data was being pushed. As a result, for months or much longer, the data that had been appearing in the dashboards looked a certain way, even though it wasn't factual.
Okay.
And there was pushback from the executive team on fixing it because people had become accustomed to seeing the numbers look away.
Sure.
They didn't want the uncomfortable reality that the numbers were going to start looking different. And I have to think we're recording this in, early to mid 2023, where we're about to see our analytics data transition from Universal to GA4. There will be many examples of this.
Oh, that's for sure going to be a big challenge.
Millions of websites. And it takes it takes some data literacy, as you said, to confront the fact that there are going to be errors, or let's call it, there are going to be inconsistencies when you have one type of data collection and then you bring along a different system to do data collection. But aside from those, there are still errors that can creep in via other ways. And this has to be an open conversation between, you're right, the data engineers and the marketers and the executive. We've all got to get more comfortable with saying, what's the answer? Well, I can't just say the answer is X. Hear me out and let's go through it and see where the answer may not be X and why. I meant why, WHY.
So that's really nice call out, because I truly believe that engineering happens when people are actually stop typing and start talking.
Yeah.
So they need to collaborate. Data engineers could know what is expected, and like they don't have normally marketing expertise how the data should look like, and meeting the expectations of business users is the other challenge. But yes, this is where they would need to collaborate a lot, for sure. And you know what? I have this saying that you can torture data long enough so it will support somebody's beliefs. It just takes time, right?
Yeah, or you can turn it around and say, I have checked the data, it's right. We have coordinated all the steps needed to faithfully get that data to this point. Now we have to do what the data says.
Well, it also takes guts, like
Very
can
much.
you imagine can you imagine data engineer telling that to executive, like, no, I'm not gonna
Hard.
step away. This is how it looks like because I checked it hundreds of times. Yeah, sometimes people will just, bail out and do whatever they were asked to do. And this is also the conversation we need to have. People need to embrace the data the way it is.
We're about to see an age where that data isn't only being consumed by executives, but it will be going into systems like a large language model, where that data is going to be what it uses to, for example, send out marketing messages. And so, frankly, with all due respect to the executives, I don't care about their opinions and the consequences of them becoming blind to the reality of accuracy on the data. The consequences are frankly bigger than just them making a decision in a void. The consequences are that it screws up our whole marketing program.
This is such a big change that most of marketers and most of leaders were not anticipated at all. This is such a big disruption that is happening, and this is terrifying simultaneously because I don't have an answer for what's going to happen. I'm terrified as any marketer, as any executive out there, because I don't know what future holds us for us. I mean, in a way, with this new technologies, yeah.
But I think what you and your team have done is at least offered one way for us to reduce the fear by nailing down one part of this, the data accuracy part. Yuliia, if people want to get in touch with you or find out more about Masthead, where can they go?
So yeah, first of all, you can visit Masthead Data website, mastheaddata.com, or you can also reach out to me on LinkedIn, Yuliia Tkachova, and I would be happy to talk to you and, have a meaningful conversation about data observability and the way you deliver that in your organizations.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. I know we tore into some new territory here, but I think it's what people need so that they can truly get the insights that are going to make their marketing even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.